your conscience and my conscience, and I suspect everyone who can hear us, believes slavery is wrong. I'm not accusing Muslims of believing slavery is right, because I actually think your conscience is better than your book. Yeah, so you did say that. You did say that, and that is on record. 1 second. So, Jesus, in a time when slavery was normal, never took a slave. He is our example. Muhammad, in a time when slavery was normal, took slaves and allowed his followers to sell slaves. Is that a good example to you? Yes, and you said, hold on, and you said it is a good example. You said, so it is a good example today to have slaves.
No, I didn't say that.
So I'll ask you directly.
No.
I'm gonna ask you this question directly.
Wait.
Okay.
You asked the question, I replied to it, and you are asking the same question again.
Because you're denying your earlier answer.
No, I explained to you. When you compare something, you have to compare an apple with an apple. You cannot compare apple with oranges.
You're saying it's okay to take slaves in war, that's what you said. So it's okay to have slaves.
In certain circumstances, if this was the situation all over the world.
Is it an example today?
But
is it an example today?
No, it's not a good.
So the Sharia has changed. The Sharia is deficient.
No, it's not.
Western law is superior to Islamic law.
See, because it's never slavery. Taking slavery was not a virtue in the first place.
It was not. So Muhammad was invirtuous. The Sahaba was invirtuous.
This is actually a system established. But what was more than slavery? Okay, wait a minute.
I want you to.
How did the West treat the slaves?
No.
And how did the Muslims
wants to talk. He doesn't want to talk about the Sahaba. Let's talk about the Sahaba.
Let's answer the question. How did the West treat the slaves?
Okay.
And how did the Muslims treat the slaves?
Okay, so
a Muslim, he feeds the slave from his own meal. Gradually. He lives with him in the same house. The only difference between a slave and a servant.
The Romans did all of that.
Okay? No, they didn't treat.
So what you're saying is Muslims are no better than Romans.
The Muslims treated slaves.
Let's be clear. I'm going to ask you a direct question. Okay, I'm going to ask you a direct question. I'm going to ask you a direct question. The Sahaba. No, 1 second. No. Add one thing. One thing.
In the Islamic system, a slave can free himself.
Okay, so
can he?
No,
free
1
himself
second.
in the Western?
1 second. 1 second. Let's just address this point. You have already said, and it's on camera, I believe, that in certain conditions it's okay to take slaves, and in certain conditions it's okay to have sex with your slaves. Now, that's what you said, and I believe you got that on camera. Did you not? Okay, so it'd be interesting when that goes up on YouTube. Now, let me answer this question. The Sharia was given to Muhammad for all time and for all people, correct? And the Sharia governs the practice of slavery, does it not? So, in Islamic, governs the practice of slavery. So, according to Islamic law, we have the governance of slavery. Do you believe that we can reintroduce slavery today under Islamic law? That's my question. No. So, and I agree with you.
I'll tell you why.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know your answer. Was Muhammad and the Sahaba wrong?
Slavery now has been abandoned. It's not the system that's established in all over the world.
And who did that?
Okay?
Who did that? The Christians.
Regardless.
No, it is important. It is really important.
Listen, you are not doing a favor to the slaves.
1 second.
When you say
1
that.
second.
Because still slavery.
It is.
Up to the
it's illegal in this country.
In America.
No, that's apartheid. That's different. Sorry, that's apartheid. That's different.
Okay, that's
slavery was outlawed in America in the 1800s.
What's the point?
Slavery is still legal in Sudan. Slavery is still legal in Sudan. Slavery is still legal in Chad. These are Islamic countries.
Wait.
Slavery was only outlawed in Morocco in 1960.
Is it the problem of slavery?
And slavery is still happening in Saudi Arabia, and it's still happening in Yemen.
No, don't say it. Don't lie. Please don't lie. This is a lie.
Who was it that abolished slavery? Was it the Muslims? No, it was the Christians.
The Bible says actually
we did slavery. We repented of slavery and we stopped slavery, and then we used our armies and our navies to force the Muslims to stop slavery. Go and read the history of the Barbers. Go and read the history of the Berber pirates. They were raiding the Mediterranean. They were taking slaves, and it was the British, the French, and the Americans that forced them to abandon slavery. It is not internal to Islam. It didn't come from Islam. It came from the Christians.
Jesus come? 3,000 years ago. Why he didn't
Now notice, you won't heckle. You'll shut up now.
Because I'm saying the truth. You cannot.
This brother heard you say slavery was acceptable. This brother heard you. It's on camera. I heard you. Brother, did this man say slavery was acceptable?
Yes, in their time, yes.
He's a Muslim. Even he says you said that slavery is acceptable.
I said that.
And now you've admitted it. Thank you very much.
Don't cherry pick what I say. I said it was acceptable in their time. It's not acceptable.
Is the Sharia acceptable today?
Yes.
Is the governance of slavery in the Sharia?
But it's not
Answer the
encouraged.
question.
You are not encouraged.
Is the governance of slavery in the Sharia?
Yes.
So, it's not acceptable today, but the governance of the Sharia, the governance of slavery is in the Sharia. Sorry, go on.
Okay. The Sharia does have rules of slavery, right? But it does not encourage slavery. In fact, it encourages freeing of slaves. In the Quran, it's clear. Can you show me a verse in the Bible where it says if you free a slave, you'll get such a reward?
There is no such verse in the Bible.
Then my book is better than your book.
Now hold on.
Because
Let me reply to that.
My book is
Let me reply to that.
encouraging me to
Let
free
me reply
slaves.
to that.
Your book does not.
Let me reply to that. The brother says, because in the Quran it talks about freeing slaves, his book is better than my book. Because he's right, there's no verse in the Bible that talks about freeing slaves. That's absolutely right. However, the worldviews of Islam and Christianity are taken from the reading of the whole text. The whole text. And in the Christian faith, it teaches quite clearly, no matter what colour your skin, no matter what class you were born into, no matter your gender, that you are all made in the image of God. Now, in the 10th century, when the Normans conquered England, they abolished the slave trade. Did you know that? In the 10th century in England. Why? Because they said it was impossible that one Christian could enslave another Christian. Now, the Islamic world didn't do that in the 10th century. They were quite well established in the slave trade in the 10th century. In the 1800s, the Christians of Britain came to the conclusion that slavery was wrong, and we abolished it in our own empire to our own cost, because we came to recognize that it was wrong according to our own religion to keep slaves. 1 second. According to our religion. 1 second. 1 second. Let me finish. 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 He wanted a verse. I'm going to give a verse at the end of the answer, if you could listen. Notice the heckling again. Sorry. Notice the heckling again. When the Muslim was speaking, no Muslim was heckling. Now I'm speaking, they want to heckle. Now, let me finish. Let me finish. Don't heckle me. Let me finish. So, Abraham Lincoln and the Americans. Abraham Lincoln was inspired by the Bible to fight a war in his own country to abolish the slave trade. No war in the Muslim world has ever been fought to abolish the slave trade. What was the inspiration behind the Christians who tried to abolish slavery? I'm going to give it to you right now. I'm going to give it to you right now. This was the inspiration. This is the verse they quoted when they were creating tracts against the slave trade. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds, and over the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth on the earth." God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female. This verse talked about the first man, Adam and Eve. The Christians argued, this is their argument. They said, since all human beings are made in the image of God, since all human beings come from the same ancestors, we cannot defile the image of God by keeping slaves. That was why the Christians abandoned slavery. The Muslims never did that. The Christians forced them to do it. And they're still keeping slaves today in Chad and Sudan. Today, right now,
how many are there?
you can go by thousands. You don't know.
Come on, that's a joke.
You don't know. You don't know the stories that are told by the Christians who speak of the Muslims. No,
Which city?
go. Listen, it's not hard to research. I encourage all of you who are listening to me. Research the plight of the Christians of southern Sudan, and they will tell you how the Muslims came from the north, raided their villages, and took their women and children as slaves. That's their account today.
Okay.
They're not making it up. They're telling you about what is happening to them today, because Islam and Muhammad never gave you the reason to abandon slavery. He only...
And they are discovered, he shall pay her father 50 shekels of silver.
Yep.
He must marry the young woman, for he has violated her. He marries the victim and he pays her father 50 shekels.
Yep.
Okay?
May I reply, or do you want to go to your next verse?
He can never divorce her as long as he lives.
Yep.
Can you imagine someone takes a lady, a virgin lady, he rapes her, and then he goes to her father and pays 50 shekels, and he cannot divorce her.
Yep.
And she has to live with him. She has to live with the one who raped her
May I reply?
all her life.
May I reply?
Is that a law of God?
May I reply? The brother quotes the Bible accurately. This is in the scriptures. God does command this. Now, let us ask ourselves a couple of questions about the verse. Firstly, do the Jews do this today? No, they don't. But the Jews believe in the Torah, so it's interesting to think why they don't. Now, this account is talking about a period of time when the honor of the family was of such priority that if the woman had sex outside of marriage, it brought shame, brought shame on, can I finish? Brought shame on the entire family. If a woman was raped, it was sex outside of marriage, it brought shame on the entire family. Let me finish. Let me finish. Let me finish. Now, Christians have no concept of this today. We don't do this. Which cultures have you heard about in the news where they kill people for family honor? Pakistani Muslims, Egyptian Muslims.
But is it justified that in our
Now hold on one second. Hold on one second. So why did God create this law? Because the Jewish people back in the 2nd, 3rd century BC had similar attitudes back then that many Muslims have today. And God created this law to prevent the murder of the woman.
You believe that?
That is what I believe. In Islam, we have the practice today that women are being killed for honor. One second.
Is it
The
okay
Jews
to kill a woman in honor in Islam? Is it okay?
One second.
What are you talking about?
One second. One second.
Is it legal?
I'm answering your first question. Let me answer that and then I'll answer your second question. So the answer to the first question is yes. God took the filth of the earth, the slaves of Egypt who had been savaged and brutalized, and he took them on a journey that have turned them into the people we know today who fill our universities and are a great contribution in terms of learning, and who don't practice what is in their book, because they will be the first to tell you that they don't need to, and that's the testimony of the Jewish people. That's the testimony of Jewish
He
people.
just admitted in the Bible.
The Muslims,
Can you admit
the Muslims
He's preaching
still
though.
practice slavery today because it is in their book. In their book.
Are they good Christians when they do that? When they don't follow the rules of the God?
Absolutely.
Then the rule of the God maybe is wrong?
Nope.
Or they are wrong? One of them?
No, neither.
How could that be?
Because the answer, may I reply?
It's a
He asked the question, how can Christians not follow something, well, we're actually talking about Jews, not Christians in this instance, but I'll defend the Jews.
Same God.
I'll defend the Jews. One second.
God.
It is, and that's why I'm going to defend the Jews, because they're my spiritual cousins.
Okay.
Without Judaism, there is no Christianity. So, in answer to this question, how can the Jews of today, who clearly do not follow this Old Testament teaching, justify that? Well, the reason is this. It isn't because the Old Testament law is wrong. And it isn't because they are wrong, it's because the circumstances have changed.
Thank you.
The people of Israel
Thank you.
and
Thank you very
society,
much. Thank you very
the
much.
people of Israel and society
Thank you very
no longer measure the
just
honor
have
of
gave me
families
an answer.
in the purity of their women. This is something that hangs over in Islamic societies, not the Jewish one.
Thank you very
A
much
woman
for
to
your
You
Right.
reply.
justified
taking it to
slavery,
slave.
and everyone
I
heard
want to
you
thank
do
you
it.
first. I want to thank you for your reply because you gave me an easy reply to your claims. Okay. Now, here is the Bible that says it's okay to rape a woman, to take her as slave.
No, it didn't say it was okay to rape.
No, he ordered. If a virgin
No,
woman
it commanded.
to be,
Where does it
to be
say
wor-
it's okay to rape?
It says
not
it's
in the verse.
okay. It's okay.
No, it doesn't say that it's
She
okay.
has to marry.
It
the
says
rapist.
if someone
That's
is
what the Bible
raped.
says.
And it's
That's what I'm saying,
talking
it
about
says that. That's
3,000 years ago. This is the Iron Age.
No, the point. That's not the point. The point
wait,
is
let
you
me-
think
let me
that
speak.
just God would ordain that.
I'm saying.
what I'm saying.
No, let's
I'm
be
not
clear.
saying that the
Let me
practice
reply to this. Let me reply to this. Notice, please, that my Muslim brother here no longer wants to talk about slavery in
I
Islam.
won't.
He wants to talk about something in the Bible. That's fine, because he conceded that he was justifying slavery. In the Bible, Christ was dealing with an Iron Age people who were brutal and savage because their history was brutal
That's your
and
word.
savage.
That's your
That's
understanding.
absolutely right.
That's not in
These
the
are
Bible.
my words.
Okay.
And these are my words, and I believe that that can be testified through looking at the scriptures.
Show me.
These,
Show
well,
me.
in Exodus,
Does it
you asked me a question, let me answer. You said, show me. I'm going to give you some references.
Okay.
Read the book of Exodus. It talks about the brutality that the Hebrew slaves suffered under the Egyptians, how they were brutalized.
Okay.
It shows how they were taken out of that land into the desert and then into Palestine in a world surrounded by enemies. They were a brutalized people living in a brutal world. Are we really surprised that they had a brutal understanding of life?
So does that,
God was
does that
seeking
just-
to protect,
Okay,
in
can
the
I-
minds of ignorant
can I
people,
reply?
the women from being murdered for family honor. Something that still happens in the Islamic world today.
Wait,
Why?
Don't come to the Islamic world. First of all, let me reply.
Just ask him, do you know what used to go on here in Hyde Park Speaker's Corner? What the Christians used to do here to women? Do you know?
I know.
Do you know?
I know
What
that
used
some of the
to happen?
Christian women here talk about how they've been touched up by some of the Muslim men. I know that they testify of that.
I'm asking you, do you know? Why are you being sarcastic? I'm asking you, I thought you were a knowledgeable man.
What's it-
I've asked you, do you know what used to go on in Hyde Park?
Well, you're going to have to be
Do you-
more specific than that.
What used to happen here before it was Speaker's Corner? What used to happen in Hyde Park to women?
I know that Muslim. I know that.
Wait,
Wait,
Muslim?
come
Forget
on.
about Muslim now. I'm asking you, what used to happen about Christian?
Okay.
What used to happen about Christian women in Hyde Park?
Yeah, the Christian. I know some of the Christian women that have this testimony, and they testify some of the Muslim men were touching and feeling them up.
Adultery.
That's what used to
come
happen.
on, we're going crazy
talk now. So what example are you
I'm
asking?
asking you, do you know the history of Hyde Park?
I've given you what I know.
No, you don't know.
Tell him.
I don't
Oh, I'm
know.
going to read it. This is hanged. Christians used to hang women here. Hang them.
So, and your point?
And my point? For honour.
Yes,
Honour of the family
exactly.
as well. Honour of the
And do
family.
we still do it today? No, because the ethics of our religion
Who says that?
have moved
Who
us
says that?
beyond
Who
such
says that?
savagery.
Who says that?
But in the Islamic world,
I know personally, a white
in
girl
the Islamic
murdered
world,
because she was going out with a
the
black guy.
Muslims still
I know
kill
that
their
in the
daughters
family.
for honour.
Yeah.
Do they? Do they do it in Pakistan?
That's culture.
Do they do it in Egypt?
Culture. That's not religion. Don't mix up culture and
Answer the
religion.
question.
Don't mix up culture and religion. Is
that's
that
what you're
religion?
doing.
Is that culture or religion?
That's what you're doing.
But that was religion.
You're trying
That was
to
religion.
say-
That was religion.
Your argument is
That's culture and religion.
when
That's not-
Christians
I'm not
killed
involved.
women
I'm
for
not
honour,
involved.
that was Christianity. But when
That was
Muslims
Christian.
killed
In the
women
name
for
of
honour,
Christ.
that was culture.
That was in the name
That's
of
a
Christ.
double standard. That is a double standard.
Christianity.
It's a double standard.
Don't read it. Read
It's
history.
a double
Read
standard.
history. Read history.
Explain to me at this moment in time.
Read history. You don't listen.
At this moment in time.
Let's stick with the book.
That's all you ever do is talk.
I agree.
We have to differentiate between
I'll give you
actions.
facts.
Wait a minute. We have to differentiate between the actions of people and what's written in the book, right? Yeah, right?
I agree.
We should agree about that.
I agree.
Okay? So when you tell me that there are honor killing in some parts of the Muslim area, first you have
That's
to
still
tell,
happening today.
First, fine. If it's happening in the name of God, we tell them, show us where in the Quran or in the Sunnah that justifies honorable killing. It's not justified.
Okay,
In fact,
I agree
if,
with you.
If a father kills his daughter, he will be killed.
I agree with
according
you.
to Sharia law.
I agree with
So
you.
these people are violating the Islamic law.
So, the brother has established a principle. The principle was that in refutation of those cultures within the Islamic world that murder women for honor, that they are not following Islamic law.
Rubbish.
Now let's apply that same principle to slavery.
Slavery?
Does
You
the
kill
Quran
most
govern
people.
slavery?
What's that?
No.
Listen.
Does it?
Quran
Slavery,
encourages
you want to talk about
the
slavery?
freeing of
Do you want to
slaves.
talk about
Does it
slavery?
govern
Do you want to talk about
Doesn't the
slavery?
Bible-
happening, like you said, in the barbaric era.
So,
was-
but
what's
it's
that?
also happening today
No,
in the Islamic world.
but it's not.
Yes.
It's not
In
allowed.
everyone. Are you trying to say that Islam is responsible for more slavery in history than Christianity?
That's actually factual, yes. It is true. It's a fact. The Islamic slave, the Christian slave trade, the Christian slave
carry
trade
on.
lasted for 300 years
Right.
and enslaved between 50 and 80 million people.
Rubbish!
Barbaric and
Rubbish!
savage.
How many millions did he kill? 100 million over the sea!
The Islamic
Millions
slave
and
trade,
millions.
by
Hundreds-
comparison,
hundreds and
lasts
hundreds of
for
millions.
1,400 years
South America.
and enslaved
Go and read your
140
history.
million
Go and
people.
read your history!
And that's not counting the ones
Go
they
and
kill.
read your history! Go and read your history!
Learn your facts.
Bollocks! Bollocks!
I'm going to go because my voice is going. You take
See you
care.
later.
Another time. Thank you. And it's
Go
refreshing.
and read your white history!
It's refreshing
Go
to
and
meet a
read your white
Muslim
history.
who's willing to stand
Go and
against
read your
those
white
who.
history.
Yeah, it's good to see.
They don't have any legs to stand on when it comes to the
Hundreds of millions!
Well, it's interesting. I'd like to talk to you more because I only know of a few groups of Muslims who reject the Hadith.
Absolutely.
So what is the moniker of the group of Islam that you follow? What is the name of the group of Islam?
We don't name ourselves.
You
They
don't
give
name.
us names.
Okay.
We say we're Muslims. We define ourselves as Muslims. And that's
When you
it.
say they give you names, are you talking about Sunni Muslims?
Sunnis and Shias, what exists in the scripture is either you're a Muslim or you're a non-Muslim. And I'm a Muslim, so I try to follow the example of Ibrahim we call him.
And speaking to a, since you've not given your sort of definition of the kind of Islam that you follow, speaking to a
Talk to me.
Muslim,
Let me ask you something.
speaking to a Muslim, that is rude to interrupt. Speaking to a Muslim who only believes in the Quran and not the Hadith, would you agree with me that there is no verse in the Quran that says that Muslims should compile hadiths or write hadiths or follow
There's
hadiths?
actually a challenge in the Quran.
Please, can you share that with
And
us?
that is Surah 52, verse 34.
Can we pull that out? You pull it out in your translation and I'll pull it
Allah
out in my
says,
translation.
let them produce a hadith like this if they are truthful. So there's an open channel there.
Surah
52.
Surah 52.
My brother,
Verse 34.
what's the first word of the Quran?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
And carry on. What's the first kalma? What's the first kalma?
There is no.
What's the first kalma? You're not a Muslim. I knew you weren't a Muslim. La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. That's the first kalma. Do
Where
you
is
know
it?
it?
Where is it in the
Do you
Quran?
know it? Do you know it?
It's
Say
shouting.
it.
So-
Say it.
so-
Say
so
La
52
ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah.
You're being really
You
rude
don't
now.
even know it.
You're
not
being
a Muslim.
really rude now. So, which is the what verse would you use to argue against the idea of hadith?
Let them see. They've translated the Arabic word is hadith.
Yeah,
So Allah said, let them produce a hadith like this.
right.
They can't, if they are truthful, they cannot. So the challenge is actually 4 challenges. One challenge is to bring a Quran like this. Muslims agree that we can't bring a Quran like this.
Yeah.
The second challenge is Allah says, bring 10 surahs like this. Muslims collectively agree that you can't bring 10 surahs like this. The third challenge is let them even produce 1 surah like this. And again, Muslims collectively agree that you can't even produce 1 surah like this. And the fourth is let them produce a hadith like this. They've got 6,000 hadiths. But they say, oh, it's not in direct competition or it's not what Allah is talking about. But Allah,
Would you agree with me that there are contradictions between the hadiths and the
absolutely,
Quran?
absolutely. The hadiths for me are the satanic innovations. They got nothing to do with the scripture. Absolutely. That's why there are so many contradictions in hadiths, and that you hear a lot of people that can't defend hadiths. they get irate, they start
Yeah.
getting aggressive, they start
agree.
becoming abusive.
And Muslims can't agree about hadiths either.
No, they can't.
You got the Shia saying that
Absolutely.
we won't accept hadiths
You've
from
got,
Aisha.
you've got Sunni
They won't accept
Arab
ones from
speaking,
Bukhari.
you've got
not
Sunni
Bukhari,
Arab speakers, you've got
yeah.
Shia Arab speakers, and the loggerheads, they don't agree with their understandings or versions of Islam. And
Now, I mean, you understand that many Muslims who might be hearing you saying that the hadiths have got nothing to do with
I
Islam.
want them to hear it because a lot of them don't hear it.
But they would say that you're not an orthodox Muslim. They would say that you're a heretic. Equivalent to, like, for
Absolutely.
Christians, like we think of Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons, they would say that you're a heretic, that you're not really a Muslim.
Yeah, because
How would you reply to that?
because they ignore the very essence of the Quran, but more particular, they don't understand the second chapter and the second verse, as it the third verse, those who acknowledge the unseen. And the only understanding that they have of that is that we don't see God and we don't see the angels and we don't see the jinns. That's the only concept that they understand of that. But what they don't understand also is the unseen guidance of the Creator. And you probably agree with me that he who seeks the truth, only the truth will set him free.
Yes.
And the Arabic word or the quality or attribute to Allah is Al-Haq, because he's the only one that speaks the truth. So if I translate that word into Arabic, he who seeks Allah, only Allah will set him free. So,
Let me ask you another question, because I think it's important. I spoke earlier about the persecution of Christians in the Sudan, in the South Sudan, where Arab Muslims come to the south, they attack Christian villages and they take slaves into the north.
Absolutely.
And that's justified, as we've heard from the Muslim speaker, by the fact the Quran and the Hadiths. Because in war you can do that kind of thing, he said.
You can't.
Now, you're rejecting that, to be
Absolutely,
clear.
you can't do that.
Is
POWs
your kind of Islam persecuted by the Muslim majority?
When you say with
Well,
the
for instance, if you went into a mosque
yeah, oh, don't go.
and expressed your beliefs,
Oh, absolutely.
could you
You
go
hear them
into
round
any
here?
mosque and would they welcome you with open
Well,
arms?
firstly, I won't go in any mosque because no mosque is constructed for the pure remembrance, the purification of themselves, for the remembrance of Allah. They don't do that. Every mosque on every corner, you see, what they don't even realise that the salah, the prayer that they're supposed to conduct, the bowing and prostrating, that is purely for the remembrance of Allah only. And there are many, many verses that Allah says that your salah is for me and me alone. Yet in their salah, they mention the name of the prophets.
Yeah.
That completely
Where
violates
did
the
they
text.
mention the name of Prophet?
They completely violates the.
Where did they mention
The
the name
text.
of Prophet? In the verses?
No,
When they're reciting the verses of the Quran?
don't-
How did they mention? Where
no.
did they
When you pray your salah,
Yeah.
do you not say At-tahiyatu lillahi wa salamatu ayyuhan nabiyyu? Do you not in your salah say Ashhadu an
But
la
that doesn't
ilaha-
mean you're praying
No,
to Prophet.
Answer
Well,
my
you
question.
should answer his question.
And it says,
Answer
وَأَشْهَدُ
his
أَنَّ
question.
مُحَمَّدًا رَسُولُ
I didn't hear
اللَّهِ.
your answer.
And then in your salah you read the Durood Sharif, which is not even from the Quran. It's
Is
not
this
even
true?
from the Quran.
Is it
But
true?
what would
No,
you
no,
claim
hold on.
that they're
Hold
doing
on,
in
one
the
second,
salah
one
that
second.
is taken
He's-
away from worshipping Allah?
One second.
What? No,
No, he asked you a question.
And I
Answer the
answered.
question.
And I answered. What is that?
Do you do what
How
he said
does
you
that
did?
back your claim that their prayer is for the prophets and not Allah?
Really?
How does that?
I have no beef in this.
How does
I'm
that?
not a
How
Muslim.
does that make
But
sense?
I
How
don't
did you
think-
put
I
the
think
two
you should
together?
answer this question.
Why did you?
They can't
Why did you
understand.
come to that
They're not about the
understanding?
very essence.
How did you come to that understanding?
I like
Can't
you
answer. You can't answer.
No, you didn't answer his
No,
question.
you're just
He
trying
asked
to dot two.
He asked you.
You're
didn't
just trying to
answer it.
dot two dots together.
No,
for
he
no-
asked you a question
for
and
no
you
reason.
didn't answer it.
You claim that they go to the mosque. These days you can't go to a mosque because in the mosque they don't pray to. It's not for the sole purpose of Allah, but for the prophets because they mention the name of the prophets
I didn't say
in their
this.
prayer.
Listen, I'll make
That
it
makes no sense.
I'll make it
You're a liar.
So, the brothers asked me to do a wrap up of the debate that I was having today with some Muslims, and the issue that we ended up talking about was verses in the Quran and hadiths or Sahih al-Bukhari that talk about Muhammad permitting slavery, owning slaves, and permitting the selling of slaves, and the Sahaba having slaves. And initially, the Muslim community wanted to reject that idea and say that it wasn't in the Quran. When I said that, they accused me of lying, which seems to be a common retort. So then I read them this verse. But force not your maids to prostitution when they desire chastity, in order that ye may make a gain in the goods of this life. But if anyone compels them, yet after such compulsion is Allah oft forgiving, most merciful to them. Now, the point of the Quran is saying that Allah is discouraging the forcing of prostitution. He's discouraging that, that's clear from the text. But he's also saying that if someone does do it, Allah will turn in forgiveness. Now, this verse, and that is Surah 24, Ayah 33. And then this verse in Surah 4, verse 24. And this particular ayah is talking about what kind of women you can have sex with, in what circumstances, and what kind of women you can't have sex with and in what circumstances. And it states clearly, also prohibited are women already married. Pretty good advice. I'm a Christian, I agree with that. Except those whom your right hands possess. So your right hand possesses a woman who may very well be married, and it implies that you can have sex with them. Now, this is problematic if you believe that Muhammad is an example to us today. Now, it's true, Christians, Muslims, Jews of the 1st century, the 2nd century, the 7th century, all had slaves, all kept slaves. And it is true that the Bible admonishes, talks about slavery in the same way that the Quran does. But Christians and Jews don't practice slavery today. And the reason for that is because our religion, based upon the writings in Genesis where it talks about man being made in the image of God, came to an understanding, an ethical understanding, that slavery is wrong. And so we banned it within our own countries, and then we used our armies and our navies to suppress it in parts of the Islamic world. There's never been an abolition movement within the Islamic world. The Islamic slave trade continued for 1400 years and continues today in places like Sudan and places like Chad and a few other places that could be mentioned. The reason why it continues is because the Sharia is understood by Muslims to be a law given to Muhammad for all time, which means that it is applicable today. It's governable today. And we had Muslims admit that slavery could be governed today under Sharia law. In other words, slavery could be reintroduced according to Islamic law. The Christian faith is different. We don't have a legal-based religion. Our faith is an ethical-based religion, which means that as we come to understand more deeply the teachings of Revelation, and as that seeks into our soul and changes and modifies our being and how we understand ourselves in the world, we can prohibit something that at one time we might thought was correct, like we did with slavery, and slavery is a perfect example of that very transformation. However, in Islam, because it is a legal religion, there is no basis upon which you can abolish slavery. It's true the Quran says, set slaves free. But then the question arises, why was there no abolition movement within Islam? Why did the Muslims never get rid of slavery? Why did the slave trade continue from the time of Muhammad to the present and still goes on today? And before everybody gets hyped up about the issue of whether they agree with Yusuf Ali's translation of the Quran or whether they think there's a better translation that they want to use, I just ask them not to forget the fact that the slave trade is still continuing today, and anyone with a good conscience should still fight against it. And you've got to look at what's your moral example and your inspiration. Your moral example and your inspiration, for Muslims is Muhammad. And Muhammad had slaves, he allowed his Sahaba to have slaves, and he allowed them to trade in slaves. Jesus lived in a time when slavery was totally normal, and if he had had slaves, nobody would have batted an eyelid, but he never had a slave. And it is not just the words of our prophets that we should follow, but also what they do by their actions. And Jesus never had a slave. And this, and what it says in Genesis about being made in the image of God, was the basis by which Christians convinced themselves to abolish slavery. And that is essentially the argument that we had. There are other videos out there where the Muslim speaker actually talks about reintroducing slavery. And that should address questions to Muslims of good conscience. Because if your conscience is telling you slavery is wrong, but your book is telling you slavery is right, then you have to choose between what God gave you in your mind, your conscience, versus the book that is in your hand. If your conscience is telling you slavery is wrong, but the example of Muhammad says that it's okay, then your God-given conscience is leading you out of Islam.